Welcome to ACP, the Amazon Connect podcast. This is the show that focuses on Amazon Connect and related technologies. I'm your host, Tom Morgan, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, AWS Solution Architect and Contact Center Consultant, Alex Baker. Find out more about Cloud Interact by visiting us at cloudinteract.io. It's time for another ACP. I'm here. Alex is here. Hello, Alex.
Hello.
Hello. And this week's going to be interesting because we've got an opportunity to kind of do a deep dive into a very sort of specific thing, which is what we always wanted to do with some of these podcast episodes. Sometimes it's good to look across and see what everyone else is doing and focus in on different sort of broad areas, but sometimes it's good to go deep as well. And so this week we thought we would go into some real detail about some of the billing around Amazon Connect, and specifically some of the things that we've seen recently around consumption versus subscription-based billing. So that's kind of the overall topic. But before we really dive into that, let's start off sort of right at the beginning with what we mean by all of that, and in general terms, how we pay for Amazon Connect. So if we sort of rewind maybe, I don't know, let's say about a year. If I'd asked you about a year ago, how do you pay for Amazon Connect? What would you say?
Yeah, maybe even slightly more than that now. But yeah, so originally when Connect was released, it was with that pure consumption billing model. And by that, we mean you pay on a sort of per minute basis for what you use, which was, I think, a real disruptor when it first came out. Contact Center as a service, and Contact Center was generally more sort of around a licensing model. So you'd hear per user per month figures, for example. Mm-hmm. And when the consumption-based billing came out, yeah, it was a bit of a breath of fresh air. If you have customers or if your own contact center has sort of spiky or peaky loads in terms of call volumes, actually consumption billing could be quite a cool thing for you, because if you have, a real sort of trough of low usage in certain months, whereas with the previous model, you'd be paying your per user per month fees throughout. With the consumption-based billing, if you're not using it, you're not paying as much for it, which is about the size of it.
Yeah. And per user per month makes sense in that sort of old world, the infrastructure-led world where you've got, servers racked in cases, you're using up load, you're using CPU memory, those types of things. But obviously Amazon Connect is very much cloud first, and so their model is kind of more aligned to that cloud first model. And I think that's why it was such a disruptor, right? Because not only was the tech quite different, but because of that, it gave them the freedom to be quite different on the pricing as well.
Yeah, agreed.
And it was, like you say, it was that kind of real disruptor in the market compared to how things were. And yeah, so one of the things that we always say as well is that it's having that sort of consumptive billing model. And to be clear, it's not a one single number that is per minute, depending on what you're doing. So there's all sorts of things that if you do this, if you do that, like everything's got a little bit of a price attached to it, but it's all per action. It's all per call, or it's per chat, or it's per activity. So it's consumptive in that way, in that if you do nothing, if you just don't open your shop on a Wednesday, you won't pay any money on a Wednesday, more or less. And there's probably, now that I think about it, I don't know, are there per monthly charges for the phone lines? Is that a thing?
Yeah. So you're right. There are, it's not exactly that. If you close the shop on Wednesday, you'll get billed absolutely nothing for the Wednesday. There are a few little charges that are, I guess, sort of baseline costs. You mentioned the phone numbers, effectively a phone number rental charge. It's on a per number basis, it's pretty low. But if you've got hundreds of numbers, that baseline cost is always going to be there. There's some other stuff as well, maybe not Connect itself, but around the supporting services. So things like S3, where you're storing your call recordings. Obviously, the more you're storing, the more capacity you're taking up, and therefore the more that kind of baseline cost for the storage increases. What you tend to see, though, is that things like S3 actually form a sort of relatively low proportion of the total costs for Connect deployment, because they're effectively pretty cheap for a massive amount of storage.
And the other sort of advantage of doing it this way with this kind of consumptive billing, it made it very easy to do proof of concepts, right? And we've talked about this before. You can show it with your credit card, you can get going quite quickly, but it's not just how easy it is to onboard, it's how relatively cheap it is to do like a proof of concept with, half a dozen calls through a couple of different people. And because you're not paying that upfront, onboarding cost essentially, or like paying for a month's worth of licensing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was really revolutionary to me when I first came across Connect. Certainly it was, I've mentioned this before, the barriers to entry for a sort of legacy contact center solution were much, much higher. And yeah, you talk about the POC or ease of doing a POC. There was always that thought that, wow, we've got to invest tens or hundreds of thousands up front in things like licensing, things like kit, in order to just start that POC. And maybe you have the commitment around the licensing as well. That was another biggie. So it wasn't typically easy to sort of get a set of trial licenses. There were commitment periods that you had to tie yourself into. Whereas with Connect, like you say, put your credit card details in, spin up a POC on whatever you want to do. If it doesn't work out for whatever reason, then you can just turn it off and you can stop that billing. There's no monthly or yearly commitments or anything like that.
Yep. Very easy come, easy go. So I said, talk to me about what it was like, a year ago. So over the last year or so, we've seen some new features come to Amazon Connect, some exciting new features. And we've talked about all of them, I think, actually, on previous episodes. But that has changed the billing model slightly, hasn't it?
Yes. And I guess some of them it came as a bit of a shock, I think, to some people when it was, because people have probably got used to, there was that initial change where it was like, wow, Amazon Connect is consumption based. That's kind of great for our use case. And then we had a few years of that. And then some of these new features came in, and actually it was a bit of a shock to the system to say, okay, so it's mostly consumptive, but now we've got a few things that are that sort of per agent per month. One thing that it's worth mentioning is that it's still sort of semi-consumption based, if that's possible, in that if you're not using the feature for a particular month, you don't get billed for it. It's not that sort of license-based model where you say, I want to turn on quality monitoring evaluation forms, for example. I've got 100 agents, and then from that point into the future, you're paying the per agent per month fee all the time. If you don't use it 1 month, you don't get billed for it. So we should point that out.
It's not a commitment model, right? It is, but it is, rather than being consumptive on activity, it's sort of it's like a monthly charge that is triggered by activity almost.
Yeah. And the other thing that's worth pointing out, we've noticed this with a few of our customers, is the way it appears in the billing. It sometimes makes, for certainly the first time you see it, a bit of a breathtaking first day of the month if you're looking at the pricing page. So things like, if you've got, as one of our customers does, around 1,000 agents using the forecasting, capacity planning and scheduling, that's $27 per scheduled agent per month. And that kind of hits your AWS billing on the first day of the month. So you kind of look on the 1st of October and think, wow, that's a big charge for the first day of the month.
Well, this is like to the whole point of how different this is to not almost, but lots of things in AWS that are consumptive, because even the Cost Explorer can't really deal with this first of the month. There's this big number because it throws out all of the forecasts. It throws out all of the estimated spend. Everything looks terrible until you're about a week in and it's like, oh no, that just happened once. It's not going to happen every day. Like that, you know what I mean? Like even AWS's back end cost modeling and Cost Explorer stuff doesn't cope well with this kind of one-off monthly costs. That's just to kind of highlight how different it is from quite a lot of the other AWS services.
Yeah. I guess people that are familiar with AWS but maybe not as familiar with Connect, you might liken it to the way the AWS support is billed. I think that happens in a similar way. So you'll get the per month cost on a particular day of the month. But yes, you're right. It rather skews the figures, doesn't it? So you get kind of an immediate bill on day one for, say, $50,000. it skews that forecasted figure for the rest of the month really, really heavily for the first week, like you say, and you're looking in on day one and going, oh my goodness, my estimated spend is like $500,000 or something for this month, and it's only by the start of week 2 that's ramped down quite considerably.
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably always incorrect as well if it's an average of all the days, because you're never going to have that value so high again. So your estimated costs are probably always artificially high for the rest of the month.
Yeah,
Anyway.
agreed. Yeah.
So let's talk about exactly what we are talking about. So forecasting and scheduling as a feature is something that is charged per agent per month. Evaluation forms is something that is done per evaluated agent per month. And then Amazon Q, which is their AI engine and all those kind of AI capabilities, is done per agent per month as well. So those 3 things are not consumptive in that way. They are sort of subscription based in that when you use them, you'll pay per month. Now, this is still not named users, is it? It's triggered off who does it. So it's a kind of total. And I guess it's a total. Is it? Yeah. So I've got so many questions. It's total discrete users, right? I think I'm right in saying that. It's not like overall usage, like, load based or anything like that. It's total discrete users, but you don't have to name them as soon as they start using it. That's when it triggers the bill. And I think there's not much grace period either. It's the first time they use it that triggers the charge for the month.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a couple of things to pull out there. Let's take the example of evaluation forms, which is $12 per evaluated agent per month. So like you say, if you run one evaluation on all of your agents, that's going to be your $12 that you will incur per agent per month. So it does, you can see where the potential benefits lie in, and we've talked about in the episode about QM and evaluation forms, not just doing it kind of the old way and doing manual evaluations, but taking advantage of some of the potential for automation in the platform, because it then starts to make more sense if you're kind of automating the evaluation of more like 80 or 90% of your calls. It sort of justifies that $12 per user per month a bit better.
Yes. I think that's true for a few of these as well, because if you just look at those headline numbers, the forecasting and scheduling, $27 per agent per month. I mean, that's an expensive price if you compare it to a standalone agent scheduling tool, right? Like a staff scheduling tool. 27 per agent per month is fairly pricey. Same with evaluations. If you were just talking about kind of manual evaluations, but these are more integrated into the platform, aren't they? And so you get that benefit of, it being built into. So for instance, with the scheduling and stuff, the forecasting, it can see the current activity, so it can do a good job of forecasting without too much messing around. It kind of works out of the box. Same with scheduling. It will work with the existing agent experience. So, and the stuff you were saying about evaluations is true as well. And you've already got the integration with, where you've got Amazon Q, already got the integration into the agent desktop and stuff like that. You've got those benefits, I suppose, that may justify that price of a kind of all-in-one single pane of glass for agents. And there's, yeah, I mean, maybe it could be better integrated. I don't know, but I mean, it is at least integrated more so than a standalone tools would be.
Yeah, agreed. And that sort of, because it's there natively, you haven't got that overhead of trying to integrate a third-party tool, which there's a lot to be said for that. And the forecasting and scheduling, arguably, is probably cheaper than a lot of the sort of third-party vendor solutions out there. Also, though, it's worth pointing out, it's probably a bit more basic in some areas. Amazon, as always, are working on improving that, and there's a pretty big roadmap of items of improvements that they're making to it. But yes, probably in places it's a little bit more basic. I guess a lot of it's down to, and we've talked about this around the Q functionality, the AI generated agent assist stuff. Yes, the headline price is quite expensive. It's how you can build a business case for it, and can you make it justify itself by getting more than your $40 worth of benefit from it. And I think probably that's still still in its infancy, and that there's a lot of companies, a lot of partners like us that are experimenting with it with a few customers and trying to figure out where the real proof of value is for some of these features.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to talk about that with you actually, because I know that's a lot of what you're doing, working with customers is helping them sort of prove that value. Before we do that, how do you, if you're you own a contact center, you manage a contact center, that this, if your agents start using forecasting or evaluation forms or Amazon Q, you are going to get charged this flat rate, not consumptive. So you want to make sure you know what's going on and you're in control of that. What's the best way to stay in control of knowing when users, or like preventing users if you don't want them to do those things, or just knowing when they do? Is it security groups, or is there another way of doing it here that is like turn on, turn off, or caps, or I don't know?
Yeah. So yes, security groups is a great option. So for example, if you wanted to do a smaller proof of concept on one of these things, you can just turn them on for groups of users. So Q, for example, you could have a specific security group for agents, which enables the Q functionality, and just assign that security group to your 10 POC users or whatever it might be. In terms of keeping an eye on what you expect the cost to be, and I suppose one thing about Amazon Connect and AWS billing is it can be a bit complicated, and it also, because it's consumptive, it can be difficult to figure out sort of budgetary figures, how much we're going to spend over the next 6 months. There is a fairly detailed Amazon Connect cost calculator spreadsheet where you can plug some numbers in terms of your estimated usage and get some figures around costing and what it should be. But yes, it always helps to have that, I suppose, have that preview to what you might be spending. But then you do need to sort of keep a close eye on it in Cost Explorer, look out for any of the sort of unexpected stuff. And as you allude to, try and lock it down so that everyone doesn't have that expensive feature if you don't want them to.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess there's probably reporting you can do to work out who is incurring those charges, who is it? Because I can imagine there's several layers in a big contact center as well. There's sort of a few different layers of autonomy and management there around the people looking at the costs, but then also, the shift supervisors choosing the agents that they're scheduling for that month. And, they know there's a busy period, so they're onboarding 20 more people and they just want to roll them into scheduling because it makes their life easier. But that's a significant cost they've just taken on for that month. And things like that, that just need to be worked out, I think.
Yeah, it helps if, I guess, everyone throughout the organization has some understanding of which of these are cost incurring functions and features, or back to the security group thing. So that the people that are sort of doing the day-to-day running of the operation, maybe they don't have the permissions to just kind of add in one of these features if they feel like it. It's down to sort of an admin staff member, possibly.
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I'm kind of interested in as well, that's the kind of the what, like what we're talking about, really. It's taken us nearly 20 minutes to get to the what we're talking about, which is good. But the why is interesting. Why would Amazon Connect do this? And I've got some thoughts. Some of it, I was trying to think, how else would you do it? How would you consumptively charge for forecasting and scheduling? I think that's quite hard. I don't know what you think. Would you do it? I don't know what you do it by.
Yeah, so I can see some of the notes that you've written down, and I think what you've mentioned does some of these. They're probably making wider use of things like AI, things like LLMs, which are probably massively more expensive to run than some of the previous. Yeah. I think underlying infrastructure.
That's definitely true for Amazon Q. You can, like, just knowing how those LLMs work, right? There's stuff in the background keeping those LLMs up to date, and you need to. It's kind of all or nothing on their side. I think. I don't think they can really be selective about. Maybe they can about which calls get included for. Like, I know that's the experience when you're using Amazon Q, but like the LLM that gets built on the back end, so that might be a way of justifying those costs, because they almost need to have it ready whether you use it or not, so that it's there in case you do want to use it. And so in that model, consumptive doesn't work very well because you'd have to charge so much, so.
We found it with some of the other sort of AI tools like Bedrock, for example. It can quite quickly for some of the things underlying it. So I'm thinking the sort of the linking up to knowledge bases and open search in the background, they can quite quickly start to produce big bills. And I guess having it rolled into Connect, what am I trying to say? That they sort of needed some sort of guardrails around making it available to everyone, but them just sort of hammering it. And maybe it's like a sort of barrier to entry thing. You by seeing this cost, you appreciate that you are using something that costs a lot to run, and therefore you kind of giving your commitment to it.
Yeah, weirdly and perversely, by cost capping it, you might increase rollout rather than decrease rollout. My initial thought this would hamper rollout because it's a big sticker shock. Do I really want to add $40 per every agent every month? But actually, maybe if the alternative is it's consumptive and it could easily be quite a lot more than that if you want to get into this AI game, having it capped, actually, maybe that is a nicer experience. It's tricky to argue, if you're Amazon Connect, it's kind of tricky to argue the complete benefits of known flat fee pricing, right? Having spent so long arguing for consumptive, but in some use cases like AI, maybe it does make more sense. I think there's something as well, just because of the market we're in at the moment, that this stuff needs to be profitable. And so this is well-known upfront pricing that is dependable. So there's that kind of shareholder profit thing. I don't know how real that is, versus sort of perceived, but these business units need to succeed and they need to be shown to be succeeding. We've had a couple of years of tech redundancies and everybody tightening their belts and every area of the business needing to be profitable. And this might be some of that as well. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's not sort of unheard of, is it? You look at maybe Copilot or something.
Exactly the same.
They're fairly
for exactly
chunky,
the same reasons. Yeah.
Fairly chunky sort of costs per agent per month, which I know, I guess maybe some of them, talking about Microsoft a bit now, but some of the billing has always been more towards that licensing based model. But yes, in the sphere of AI, it's definitely not unheard of, is it? I think it does. Seeing that headline cost does make you carefully consider how you want to implement it as well. If it was just something, we take Contact Lens, for example, which is fantastic native functionality. Sometimes I feel that it can be almost too easy to turn it on and have don't get me wrong, there are great benefits that you get just from turning it on, but there are also some other things that you can do with it. Maybe things like creating rules, things like the sort of topic modeling that you need to give a little bit more thought rather than just turning it on. You need to do other stuff.
Yeah. And actually, your Copilot example is a really good one, because Microsoft traditionally don't do very much consumptive billing. But the reason for that is that enterprises really don't like it very much. They would much rather have the sort of flat fee. And looking at the things that are now subscription-based, forecasting, scheduling, evaluation forms, AI, maybe less so, but those first two are very enterprisey features right there. So maybe some of that is market-driven. That's what the focus group said they wanted. But also as well, if you look and compare Amazon Connect to the competition, it's still very competitive. So maybe they're just thinking, well, we're just leaving some money on the table here. We could do better at this and just, and use these new features as a way to do that. It's always the problem with these kind of evergreen services, right? Because as consumers, we expect more and better, exciting features to be added every month for paying the same price. And eventually that doesn't work. So that's where you see these kind of new features come in with their own pricing models. And we've seen it on the Microsoft side as well, with, features being added to the E5 and E3 SKUs, but they're separate, things like Teams Premium and then Copilot, they're separately priced, because that model doesn't run forever. That I paid the same price as I paid 5 years ago, or marginally different, 2%, 3% each year, but I get so many more features all the time. It just doesn't stack very well.
Yeah, agreed. And they're quite distinctive sets of functionality as well, aren't they? So forecasting and scheduling isn't for everyone, right? You can see why some people would just say, right, yeah, I'm not interested. Equally, then if you are interested and you want to get on board with it, you kind of know where you are in terms of we've got 1,000 agents. By bundling that in, we know that this is going to be our baseline cost for it.
No, definitely. Any risks to this approach, do you think? I mean, will it make it harder to do POCs, or do we just have to be a bit more careful about what gets POC'd and what doesn't?
Yeah, I think a bit being careful and selective about it, certainly. We mentioned Q, for example. Don't just turn it on for everyone and start incrementing your costs per agent by $40 extra a month. Do that POC in a ring-fence group of people and figure out where it adds value. Yeah, I mean, so evaluation forms is another one for that. And we mentioned with evaluation forms as well, the potential for automation is much greater. So don't just do turn it on for everyone and do one evaluation per agent per month. Look at how you can automate that process and move towards more like 100% of your contact being evaluated in some way, even if then you've got your human QM team that's doing a lot of the work as well.
Yeah. And again, I think this is where partners can be helpful, because I think there's a risk. Connect can be expensive to set up because, it's the setting up, it's getting everything right. And that's where partners can help. But obviously you've got that upfront cost. But then the operational month-to-month costs are, very low. Now, if you add these things in, your month-to-month costs are going to go up. And I think there is that risk that you might just want to sort of save on the setup stuff and not do quite so much. But I think actually what you just said is a good example of where partners can really help. If you're going to pay $27 a month for every agent to do forecasting and scheduling, or if you're going to pay $12 per agent for your evaluation forms, you want to get 100% of value out of that. And so you want to do as much as you can. So to your point, you want to do all the automation because, you're not going to get charged any less for not doing it. And so you might as well. And that's where partners can really help and understand to make sure you use what you've bought to the fullest extent, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I guess it makes it harder as well to price up deployments, does it? Or is it just more questions? In sort of thinking and planning out a deployment for a customer, you have to consider, okay, not everybody is going to use evaluation forms. And so you're asking them questions that maybe they haven't really thought of yet.
Yeah. We mentioned, you're right, to some extent it is difficult to plan for what you're going to be spending. And especially if somebody's moving from that sort of legacy per user per month billing, it's sometimes difficult to get them to want to adapt to that new way of working and saying, actually, we don't really know how much you're going to be spending. It will be roughly this much based on the numbers you've given us, but we can't say it's going to be 1,000 times $100 a month every single month. Back to your point on the partners, though, we have experience of doing this for a lot of customers. We can do our very best to take the inputs that you give us and figure out roughly what your spend is going to be and justify why that's the case.
But it's almost split into two, isn't it? It's like, here's what you're definitely going to pay every month. And then here's what we think you might pay every month, which is the consumption bit. Whereas before, it would have just been like, here's what we think based on your activity and stuff. So
yeah, agreed.
It's just slightly more complicated. All right. No, that's been really interesting. We managed to yammer on about billing costs and billing types for 30 minutes. That's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Interesting area and one that I think we've alluded to it throughout, but you can, if you're not careful, you can get a few surprises and those sort of breathtaking moments. I think we've probably all had it where we've been playing in our own AWS account and we've left something on, and then you come back to it in a couple of days' time and think, oh, wow, I've just I've left on like a Redshift database or something, and it's cost me.
Now I need to remortgage the house. Yeah.
That's it. And you don't want that in an enterprise setting, do you? Where I've left forecasting and scheduling on for 1,000 users or something. We're not using it.
Exactly.
Be really careful about that kind of thing and be cognizant of what it is that you're sort of signing up to.
Absolutely. Oh, well, we could talk about this all day, it turns out. But no, we should bring this episode to an end. Thank you very much, Alex, for your insights and your knowledge. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. That way you won't miss it. Whilst you're there, we'd love it if you would rate and review us. And as a new podcast, if you have colleagues that you think would benefit from this content, please let them know. To find out more about how Cloud Interact can help you on your contact center journey, visit cloudinteract.io. We're wrapping this call up now, and we'll connect with you next time.